Detached home ownership is basically gone for many families in Canada, in the job-rich areas of Canada. I'm not saying it's hard. I'm saying it's math impossible.
Canada has the worst housing affordability within the OECD, and it isn't even close.
We are the worst in the G7 and the second worst of all 36 developed countries tracked by the OECD.
Canada does have a housing crisis.
So Canada is kind of split into two. We have areas with lots of jobs, places where you can make a good living, but you can't afford to buy a house. And sure, there's areas in Canada where there's some super cheap, affordable housing, but there's no jobs there. And it's split into the other part of Canada, and this part of Canada is frankly shrinking. It's where home ownership is possible. You can actually afford to buy a house. It's interesting because Stats Canada recently released some stats that housing has become more affordable on average in Canada. Now that includes areas with no jobs, but it's still over half of the household income is got to go to home ownership, to paying for a house. That's crazy, man. In some larger cities in Canada, it takes almost the entire household income to pay for a house. Like, check Toronto out. It's almost 90% of your median family income to make payments on a house there. It's just not sustainable. So owning a detached home, that used to be the Canadian dream, is you can get a good job, buy a home, raise a family. And having a detached home is actually really important for our way of life, to be able to have a sense of permanence, place for the kids and the dog, to be able to have a family. In fact, it seems that Canadians are actually having less children because it's hard to afford a home to raise them in. Okay, so flash over to here in Alberta, and specifically I'm in Airdrie, Alberta. We're just north of the city of Calgary, about 10 minutes north of the city. I think it's the best place in Canada to live. Now, I'm not going to tell you that housing is cheap here. It's not. The amount that it's gone up over the last 5-6 years is kind of shocking, actually. But it is possible here. A single family detached home, attached garage, decent yard, good neighborhood for under 600 grand. That's definitely possible here. And it's not possible in many areas of the country that you may be coming from. And not only is housing possible here, I don't want to say affordable, it is affordable, it's possible to afford it, just not cheap. But there's jobs here. The oil industry alone, directly and indirectly, employs 500,000 people here in Alberta. That's a lot of jobs, and good paying jobs at that. There's lots of opportunity here for tradesmen, professionals. Probably not the best place if you have no skills or don't have a trade. It's a good spot here if you're a well-skilled, well-trained person that's employable. This should be a good job for you here. Hey, just saw a notification or a notice yesterday that Olds, Alberta, that's about half an hour north of here, they just announced a new data center for some AI center. It's a $10 billion project, 3,000 construction jobs, 1,000 long-term jobs. That's huge for a little town of Olds. So that's just about a half hour from here. Lots of this stuff going on here in Alberta. In fact, household income here in Alberta is about $10,000 a year higher than it is in Ontario. Now, couple that with a lower tax. So I think Ontario has like a 13% HST, and in Alberta we only have 5% GST. It doesn't sound like a lot different, but I have a son that unfortunately just moved away with my granddaughter to Ontario to take a job there in his chosen profession. That's what he needed to do, but he didn't really count on, and it's actually becoming quite shocking for them to discover that everything they buy, there's this extra tax burden, which at the end of the month kind of adds up. Here's the thing is, Canadians aren't just complaining about the problem. Canadians are voting with their feet, and they're picking up and moving here. I was looking at some stats, and for like 11 consecutive quarters, Alberta was gaining significant numbers of people. And when you actually look at the data, almost every province is losing people, where Alberta is actually gaining people by migration. People are leaving the Ontarios, the British Columbias, the Quebecs of this country, and they're moving here to Alberta. And who can blame them? How are they going to get ahead with the cost of living in so much of this country when they can come here to Alberta and they can make more money on average, pay less taxes on average, and you can actually afford to buy a house? Sounds like win-win-win to me. Here's kind of the thing though, is that when you get an area like this that is more affordable, if enough people pile into it, it kind of drives the prices up and it becomes less affordable. And I think we've seen some of that happen here in Alberta. Now currently, this last year, we've seen the international immigration slow a little bit into Canada, and that's taken some of the pressure off Alberta. And so we've seen a bit of a pullback on some of the prices. So it's actually a little bit more affordable this year than it was last to buy a house here. But it still takes about 40% of the average household income to buy the median house here. I've spent many years in this business and in the investment side of the business. And I remember when we would track the house pricing or housing affordability index, and repeatedly year after year, like an ideal situation is where it's about 33%. So about a third of the household income goes to paying for a house, and that's fairly balanced. And I remember year after year after year, we would see it under 30%, like 27, 26, 28, 29% of household income, because incomes here were rising faster than the price of houses was rising. But we're seeing it's climb now. We're heading a little over 40% to make a payment on the average house of household income, but way more affordable, under the national average, and shockingly more affordable, like less than half of what it would take in Toronto. And we have higher incomes here, so it seems like a pretty reasonable thing to do, and I think that's what's driving lots of families here. Well, one thing I sometimes hear from people is like, oh, I couldn't move there to Alberta. The weather is really terrible and the winters are hard, and for sure it does get cold here. It doesn't always cold though. It's January as I'm filming this, and I just had somebody jog by me in shorts. And I was trying to figure out why I brought my winter jacket instead of a hoodie. So it isn't always cold here. We do get some shorter days because we're fairly far north in the wintertime. And so fair enough. A couple months of the year where it just seems like you're going to work in the dark and coming home in the dark. If you can live with that, there are some other benefits. So one of the other objections I hear is living here in Airdrie, because we're outside the main city, is people are worried about the commute when they come here. It is a factor, and there are a few days in the wintertime where that commute's not that much fun. From the edge of Airdrie to the edge of Calgary is about 9 minutes. I know those of you from big cities like Toronto are just chuckling about that. From Airdrie, I think most people in Airdrie would be at the best time of day, downtown Calgary, in 25 minutes. And it could be 40 minutes if the traffic's a little rough, and you may want to adjust your commuting times to take advantage of the better times to commute. But it's doable, right? Is there traffic? Is there weather? 100%. Is it manageable? Yeah. Now, most people that move here to Airdrie are families with kids, and so they're concerned about the schools. And you can actually look these up at the Fraser Institute. They compare schools across the province, and then you can compare across the country, and they rank really well. There are some challenges with schools being quite full because the city's growing, and there are schools that are being expanded and new schools being built, and so there are some issues. But overall, schooling has gone quite well here. But some of you might be interested. There are some private options. There's a private Christian school here in Airdrie, the Airdrie Christian Academy, and then there's a Christian program also that's part of the public system, and that's an option too. Okay, so this one's funny. Sometimes people say, well, I don't know, I really don't know, I don't know the neighborhoods there, I wouldn't know which area to pick. And I'm going to be this blunt. Yeah, that's why you call me, right? So you call me, I do know, I've been around here like 100 years, and I can help you. I'll find a home that kind of matches your needs for your family, the best commute situation, and in your budget. One of the things I hear is that prices are rising, and maybe the opportunity to move here to Airdrie, Alberta is over. For sure, prices have gone up a lot, but they're rising compared to what? Price of a single-family home in Vancouver is $2 million. They seem unbelievably cheap here when you can buy a single-family home with a decent yard, fairly new, for like under 600 grand. Seems pretty affordable to me compared to that. Hey, look, I'm not here to sell you a fantasy. I'm just here to explain that quite often, for lots of Canadians, the math works. Okay, so should you move here to Airdrie, Alberta? Is this move the right move for you? So first thing would be a job. I've noticed that quite a few people that move here bring their job with them. I had a couple that moved from Ottawa. Both of them work for the federal government. And as they moved here, they were working remotely from the federal government from home anyway. They didn't even have to tell anybody. They just came. That's actually become fairly common for remote workers. They working from home anyway, so they can just relocate here. I've had that happen quite a bit. The other thing I've had happen is we've had quite a number of people that just put in for a job transfer. So they're working for the company in another branch or another location in Canada, and they just put it in an application to transfer out to Airdrie or Calgary, and away they came. No problem. But there is a strong job market here. So that would be the first thing, is I figure out what are you going to do for a job, and to be really confident that you can either get a transfer, a remote work, or the job market is really strong for you here. Frankly, the other question you should really ask is, how important is being able to own a single family detached home for you and your family? Is that important for you? Because if you don't care, then it doesn't matter, but this is probably the place with a good job market that you could actually make that happen for you. And the next thing is, you'd have to be okay with a little bit of winter driving. This is not Southern Ontario. We can get some real winter weather here. It's usually pretty good. The maintenance is good. Maybe I'm just used to it. The other thing to look at is to make a judgment. Can you really deal with the commute? You're going to be commuting 30-40 minutes to downtown Calgary, or wherever it is in the city that you're going to be working at. It could be shorter if you're working someplace closer, but is the commute going to work for you? If you can deal with it, it might be a good trade-off to be able to buy a good single-family home that's within your budget. So if you're seriously considering a move here to Alberta, rather than starting with looking at houses, I would start with putting together a plan. Figure out what the job situation is going to be, figure out your budget, commute map, what the priorities for a neighborhood are going to be, and book a call with me. There's a link in the video description for my calendar, and we can go over your case and start building a plan for your move here to Alberta. So if you're not sure that Airdrie, Alberta is for you, then watch one of these videos here. I'm sure one of those will convince you.